Ladies and gentlemen, thieves and crooks, hoodlums of all ages, welcome to the comic Outlaw. Jack Slater, am going to be leading you on a new comic book adventure. Well, new but old, if you know what I'm saying. We're going to be doing Judge Dredd, yes, in his meeting with Batman. For the first time, Judgment in Gotham. Of course, I own nothing of any of this. It's all owned by the respective artists and publishers, of course. So let's get on with the show. Of course, we all know Batman, the crime fighter from Gotham, and Judge Dredd, that future police officer. And it starts off with a couple doing the hibbity-dibbity, if you know what I mean, and then all of a sudden, a demon from the dark dimension comes out. It is Judge Death, an evil judge from an alternate dimension who has decreed that all life is crime, and the only punishment and the only sentence is death. And here comes the Batmobile, screeching out of nowhere. Of course, Batman has to show up. It's his territory. It's Gotham. That's where it's happening. That's where it's so weird. How is this super fiend from the future, an alternate future, mind you, in Gotham? Batman pops out of the car, ready, willing, and able to take on anything that dares threaten his streets and his territory. For he is the Dark Knight, ready, willing, and able to take down anything. Except this is something new, different. The police officers try to fire whatever ammunition they have at it, and it does nothing to Judge Death, who spreads his message that all life is a crime, and the sentence, as always, has to be death. But Batman takes him out with a drop kick, and which is typical of Batman to try to come in and control and handle the situation. But he's never experienced a creature like this. This super fiend that doesn't seem to want to die. This mockery, this zombie version of some kind of farce of a police officer. So Batman, in one of those rare cases, which he does do, goes to extremes to take out this being. And yes, the vessel dies, but the soul doesn't. And the interesting thing with Judge Death is you have to really do a lot of damage to the body, as you can see here, before the eternal soul actually dissipates. It's one of the bugglers about killing him. But Batman does succeed, of course, because he is Batman. And he incinerates him. Whoosh! Judge Death is turned into ashes. And of course, Batman, thinking that he handled the situation, still goes to have a look around. And of course, this is typical. I love the way they write Batman in this. Typical detective, vigilante, Batman doing his thing. It's what you expect from the Cape Crusader. Now, also that pops up is Mean Machine from the Angel Clan. You might recognize him from the Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd movie. As sad as it is, that's the biggest reference for him. The Angel family, real quick, are cannibals that live outside the fringes of Mega City 1. They love to eat people, and they love to cause destruction. Mean here being altered, his skull, his arm, everything else. He has a dial on him that just makes him meaner and makes him want to attack, makes him more aggressive. One of his most vicious attacks is headbutting. But Batman, having to face different villains in DC, kind of just makes him look like a chump through all of his experience and all of his, like I said, dealing with various villains like Solomon Grundy, his Justice League experience, the Gotham villains, of course. And I kind of like that contrast. Now, here comes Judge Joseph Dredd. And this is the first meeting between the judge and the vigilante. Keep in mind that's going to be very important later. And Dredd, of course, fires off his lawgiver at Batman, asking him to identify himself. And it's funny at this point where Dredd kind of sucker punches Batman. Because in Dredd's mind, Batman is a vigilante. Dredd is an officer of the law. he says he's freaking a cape, and for him, it's a lot different. But all of a sudden, whoosh, just so you know, the dimensions kind of cross a lot in this one. And here comes Mean Machine. And where is he now? He's in Gotham, tearing it up. And here's that sexy, sexy woman, Judge Anderson. She's one of the judges, a psychic judge. You'll recognize her from the other Judge Dredd movie. She gets a phone call because this new vigilante has come in. They need someone to scan his mind. And Judge Anderson is, of course, Judge Dredd's partner. And they're brought into the case as Judge Dredd is interrogating Batman. And it's interesting the contrast because Batman is a vigilante, but Judge Dredd's group and organization is more fascist than anything else. It's such a contrast of views. Who is actually right in this situation? I mean, there is no democracy in Dredd's world. There's nothing like that. It's law, and the judges give the law, period. They control the news, the media, everything. So Bruce is technically breaking the law. He's a vigilante. And I love how they kind of have the older Bruce. And Anderson, of course, does scan his mind. And of course, when you go looking in the mind of someone like Bruce Wayne, you're going to find a lot of shadows that dwell deep in the dark recesses of his mind, that burn out in the bloodstains of Gotham, that haunt each and every individual that's ever set foot and had to deal with those monsters. She sees it all and says one word: weird. Costume crime fighters, it is a little weird for them, although they do experience their fair share of nonsense, but Judge Death is there. Anderson's old opponent, for Anderson has stopped him more than most. And I love how Bruce just breaks out of the shackles and punches Dredd right in the face. I love that. It gives you an idea of how much these men are actually sort of equals but different. And I just love how Batman just punches him. It's kind of a throwback to when Dredd punched one of Judge Death's lackeys. And of course the judges, you know, Dredd can't do anything one-on-one apparently. They all have to beat up Bruce. But it's the nature of the judges. He is a criminal in their eyes. In this alternate future where democracy has no meaning. Meanwhile in Gotham, of course, the Scarecrow, one of Gotham's villains, the Doctor of Fear, is of course doing his thing, dropping his spray with Tweedledee and Tweedledum, I believe, is his sidekicks. And he comes across the soul of Judge Death. And it's interesting because Judge Death and the Scarecrow have this weird bond where Scarecrow's not afraid of him. He wants to see fear. He worships fear. And it's a lot of like Death's dark judges. They all have their wants and needs, and it's dark and sadistic. And they kind of have a bond in a weird sort of way. They kind of form an alliance based on mutual psychotic craziness and just the will to spread chaos. Meanwhile, in the future, I told you it jumps back and forth a lot. Batman escapes with the help of Anderson. And of course, Dredd is no likey this situation. Anything that's out of Dredd's control, of course, he's not going to like. But Anderson knows what's going on. She knows what needs to be done. And she knows that she needs to stop Death. For she has stopped, like I said before, she stopped Judge Death more than once. His weakness is psychic attacks. So she helps Batman escape. And as Judge Death there, he's teaching the Scarecrow how to go through the process of rotting out a body for him. Because he can't inhabit just anybody. It has to be processed, rotted out, decayed in a certain way. It has to be zombified almost for Death to occupy it. And we're switching back to Dredd, of course, who's extremely pissed off that Anderson took off with Batman. I love how he's like, Dwark! I hope I said that right. And he's calling all cars on this one. And of course, Mean Machine is back in the past. just wrecking everything in the world, bashing people in and doing what he needs to do in order to, I guess, cause mayhem and chaos, because Mean Machine's not exactly the brightest bulb. And he's going on his little rampage here with basically no one or nothing to stop him. And it's very interesting that there's no other heroes in Gotham at this point, but for the sake of the story, we'll let that go. And as I said, the Scarecrow is redoing the body, re-decaying it, getting it ready and processed for good old Judge Death to occupy. It has to be done just right. And I think this is a very interesting process to actually bring him back. And of course, he gives him a uniform, which isn't exactly the same uniform. I love how he gives him a rotten chicken, a little hook thing. And as you see, he'll add a side of ribs. So I guess just in case someone barbecues him, you're good to like throw the body away and then have dinner, if you're down for that naughty zombie feast. Ugh. But anyways, Judge Death is reincarnated and ready to go on his mission to carry on his sentence that all life is a crime, with the help of the Scarecrow, momentarily, of course. You see, as always, villains have this nasty habit, of betraying each other. And it's sad, and the Scarecrow sprays him with his fear toxin, and I just love this. This is what Judge Death fears. Pretty bunnies, and happy pigs, and some weird-looking flying My Little Pony thing going, yay! I can't blame him. It is freaking horrible. But anyways, Batman and Anderson back on their quest to stop Judge Death. And I love how, Bruce is any port in a storm in this situation. Anything to get him back to his home to Gotham. And as the Scarecrow and Judge Death have a little conversation, somewhat of a mutual understanding as far as two psychotic villains can go, one wanting to spread death and one wanting to spread fear and eventual death. And off Dredd goes to search for Anderson and Batman, pissed as hell that he lost all control of the situation. And of course, Bruce knocked the hell out of him. I just love that Batman knocked the hell out of Judge Dredd. So awesome. Moving on. We are back, phasing back in Gotham. I told you, a lot of jumping back and forth. Anderson and Batman, of course, are in Gotham. They figure out what is going on. The police fill them in, which is what the police basically do to Gotham. They go in his giant Batmobile, which suspiciously looks like one of the Batmobiles in the movies. I believe part 3 or 4. And they cruise along, and she reaches out with her psychic powers looking for death, feeling that dark, evil presence as they wander the streets of Gotham. But they're not alone, for Dredd has arrived in Gotham City, and Dredd is ready to prove that he is the law, and no one escapes Judge Dredd. At a concert called Living Death, which is sort of funny considering their special guest is going to be coming on the scene soon. But I guess a heavy metal band, Living Death, yeah, is rudely interrupted by a Mean Machine, and of course the guest of honor, Judge Death. And what a better place to start than a nice large crowd to lay down his sentencing, to spill blood. And I love how Death just loves to steal the show. We have this guy up there going, yeah, while Death is just murdering everyone in sight. While the Scarecrow is there being his boosome buddy, Death goes on stage and rocks on. Yes, ripping off some dude's head. Yummy. Because you know how Judge Death works. He's carrying out that sentence, letting people know that it's time. For you're all guilty of a crime. Life is a crime. And the sentence, as always, is death. Is always death. And this super fiend is ready to lay some justice, his brand of justice, down. And as the blood is spilling, he is rudely interrupted by our heroes. Of course, death can never have his fair share, if you know what I mean. And as Batman and Anderson, of course, arrive, they have to deal with both Mean Machine and Death, who are sort of working together, but not. I mean, it's in their best mutual interest to kill the heroes and then deal with each other. And Mean Machine, of course, sets himself on Ultra Mean. Ready to rumble, they both go at it. And I just love how Death just murders person after person after person after person. As Mean Machine does what he does best and uses his head to bonk things. And of course, he bonks and bonks and bonks. Knocking down everything knocking down the stage, and just generally using his skull. Batman, of course, arrives ready, willing, and able to fight this evil demon, this zombie soul. And Batman looks at the Scarecrow, and of course, Batman knows all of his tricks. And it's interesting, the Scarecrow is using an aerosol can at this point instead of the classic sprayers that we've all become accustomed to. But this comic's a little old, so you got to work with it. And here we go. The fight goes off. Anderson, of course, starts using her psychic energy to cause a disturbance with Death. Batman, of course, joins the fray as Death starts continuing his rock concert of death, trying to fight back. But of course, Judge Dredd, Judge Joseph Dredd, shows up, not willing to surrender Batman and wanting to take Judge Death back to his dimension to lock him up for all the crimes that he's committed, the millions that Death has slaughtered. He lets loose, boom, 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 with a lawgiver. But this only pisses Judge Death off. And as you hear the gunfire, boom, bong, bong, Anderson's wandering around trying to find a way, but Mean Machine is in her way. And here it comes. Here comes Death, stalking the Bat. But you can't kill Judge Death. And as much as Bruce tries and as much as he fights, Death is that unstoppable force until Anderson leashes out her powers, her psychic energy, and traps Judge Death. And Judge Death screams out, release me. As he's pushed and trapped into the psyche of Anderson, driven deep into the recesses of her mind and locked away again. Death knows, Judge Death knows it's a matter of time before he comes back. And Mean Machine is neutralized by both Dredd and Batman. And at this point, Mean Machine's just pretty much shut down and ready to go back home and receive whatever sentence he's going to get from Judge Dredd. And as the two come to a sort of mutual understanding, I guess, even though they both hate each other, Anderson and Dredd and Mean Machine take off back to their reality, back to a future that may or may not be a world without democracy. And as Batman tries to make sense of everything that happens, he grabs the Scarecrow, grabs whatever crooks are left, and takes off back into the night, back into the city that needs him. For he is Gotham's Dark Knight. He is the one, the champion of the night. And as you can see, these are the respective writers and artists. This has been the Comic Outlaw. Catch you on the flip side.